That train whistle let out a long, lonely cry through the valley as Annabelle Porter held on tight to her one little suitcase, her knuckles showing white against that old, worn-out leather. The very last thing my dear father would have wanted was for me to go and be some stranger's mail-order bride, she whispered, so quiet you could hardly hear it, the words just disappearing into the thick steam that was swallowing up the platform there at Silver Creek Station, Colorado, back in 1878. That little advertisement in the paper had seemed like a blessing just 3 months before, when she was just desperate as could be back in Boston. Her father was freshly in the ground, and the bill collectors were circling around her like a bunch of buzzards. A respectable rancher is seeking an educated lady from the East for marriage and some good companionship. Your passage will be paid. Those few simple words had been her only way out of a life of pure poverty, even if it was leading her to a future she never in a million years could have dreamed up. Annabelle took a breath and smoothed down her navy traveling dress, the very best one she had, and she tried her hardest to look confident as all the other folks stepped down from the train all around her. She was scanning the crowd, looking for a man holding a sign with her name on it, when a loud ruckus near the station house suddenly grabbed her attention. "I don't care one bit what your ledger says," a deep voice boomed through the station. "Those cattle were promised for yesterday's train. My boys have been waiting out there since sunup." The station master, a small fellow with spectacles perched on his nose, backed away from the mountain of a man before him. "Now, Mr. Knox, I surely understand your frustration, but this here telegram clearly states the new schedule." "That telegram states what some fool up in Denver decided, not what you and I agreed upon right here." The tall man slammed his open palm down on the wooden counter, making several nearby ladies jump with a gasp. Annabelle found she could not look away. The angry rancher had to be well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders as broad as a doorway and a trim waist. His dark brown Stetson was tilted back on his head, revealing a strong face, tanned dark by the hot Texas sun. Even though he was mad as a hornet, there was something about him that drew you in, a kind of raw power that seemed to take up all the air in the whole station. "Is that Mr. Harrington?" Annabelle whispered to a woman standing next to her, referring to the man she was there to marry. The woman let out a little chuckle. "Honey, that's Kieran Knox. He owns the biggest spread in the whole county, but not exactly a place for polite folks, if you catch my drift." Annabelle gave a small nod to thank the man, then went right back to scanning the train platform. After a good 15 minutes, her hopeful spirit started to sink. The platform was almost completely empty by now, and still not a single person had come to greet her. She sat down on her suitcase, trying her best to ignore the growing knot of worry in the pit of her stomach. "Miss Porter." She looked up to see a young boy, maybe 12 years old, with a freckled face peeking out from under a hat that was far too big for him. "Yes, that's me," she said, a wave of relief washing through her voice. "Mr. Harrington, he sent me to come and get you." The boy twisted his cap in his hands, looking a little nervous. "I'm Tobias. I work over at the general store. Mr. Harrington wants you to meet him there." Annabelle's brow furrowed in confusion. This certainly was not the kind of welcome she had been expecting. "I see. Well, lead the way then, Tobias." The boy grabbed her heavy suitcase before she even had a chance to object and started heading toward the main part of town. As they walked along, Annabelle got her first real look at the town of Silver Creek. The main street was worn and covered in dust, lined on both sides with wooden buildings that had tall, false fronts. Men in cowboy hats and women dressed in simple cotton dresses moved with a sense of purpose. It was a world away from the cobblestone streets of Boston, with its dusty streets and sturdy brick buildings. That lined the main thoroughfare. "Are we getting close to Mr. Harrington's ranch?" she asked, trying to break the heavy silence. Tobias shot her a peculiar sideways glance. "About 3 miles outside of town, ma'am. Not far now." The general store stood right in the heart of town, its big glass windows showing off everything from leather work boots to colorful bolts of fabric. As they stepped inside, a little bell jingled right over their heads. A thin fellow with a hairline in full retreat looked up from behind the long wooden counter. "Well now, you must be Miss Porter." He shuffled around, wiping his hands on a worn cotton apron. "Gerald Harrington, a warm welcome to you here in Silver Creek." Annabelle reached out her hand, doing her level best to hide the surprise that washed over her. This man was at least 20 years older than she had ever imagined, much closer to 50 than he was to 30. His handshake was disappointingly weak, his palms soft as a preacher's. I am so grateful for you arranging my travel, Mr. Harrington. Your letters were so very thoughtful. Gerald's smile was a thin line that never reached his cold eyes. Yes, well, about that, we've had a bit of a change in our arrangements. You see, my sister, she arrived quite unexpectedly from St. Louis just last month. She's taken to staying with me now, keeping house and all that. Annabelle felt her stomach plummet to the floor. I do not think I understand what you are telling me. What I am saying, Miss Porter, is that my situation has changed quite a bit. I no longer find myself requiring a wife. He at least had the decency to look a little bit ashamed of himself. I have already arranged a room for you at the boarding house, just for tonight. Tomorrow, you can be on the first train heading back east. I will cover the cost of the ticket, of course. Annabelle felt all the blood rush from her face. But I sold every last thing I owned to come here. I have absolutely nowhere to return to. Gerald just shrugged his shoulders, clearly looking uncomfortable. I am sorry for your predicament, Miss Porter, but a man must do what is best for his own family. My sister needs me more than I have a need for a wife. You put an advertisement in the paper for a bride. I answered with an honest heart. We wrote letters to each other for months. Annabelle struggled to keep her voice from shaking. And now I am offering you a paid-for ticket back home. Many people would consider that a very generous offer. His voice turned as hard as stone. Tobias, take Miss Porter's suitcase over to Mrs. Wilkins's boarding house. Annabelle stood there, frozen to the spot, as Gerald turned his attention back to his account book, dismissing her as easily as if she were a traveling salesman selling something he did not want. The feeling of humiliation burned hotter than the panic that was quickly rising in her chest. Mr. Harrington, she tried again, but just then the little bell over the store's door jingled as it swung open right behind her. Harrington, I need 20 pounds of nails and a new pair of wire cutters. The ones you sold me last month are already rusted clear through. The deep rumbling voice stopped short. Annabelle turned to see the very same rancher from the train station, and he was filling up the whole doorway. His big, sturdy frame was blocking out the afternoon sun. Now that he was closer, she could see that his eyes were a shocking, crystal blue against his sun-bronzed skin. Pardon me, I did not mean to interrupt, he said, his eyes glancing from Annabelle to Gerald and back again. Gerald's face lit up, and he looked mighty relieved to have the distraction. No trouble at all, Knox. We were just finishing up here. I will get your order together right now. But Kieran Knox's gaze stayed fixed on Annabelle's face, noticing how her cheeks were flushed and how her eyes were shining with frustration. Is everything all right with you, ma'am? He asked her directly. Everything is perfectly fine, she said, her voice stiff, not wanting to air her embarrassment in front of a complete stranger. Gerald hurried from behind the counter. Miss Porter was just about to leave. She is just staying one night over at the boarding house before she takes the train back east in the morning. But there was something in Kieran's expression that said he did not believe it. Changed. This was Miss Porter, the mail-order bride. Annabelle flinched, as if the words themselves had struck her. I was under that impression, yes, that is correct. Kieran turned to face Gerald directly. The muscle in his jaw began to twitch. You are sending her back, Gerald fussed around, picking up some loose nails. My sister has arrived, as you know. There is no need for a wife now, so you allowed this woman to travel all this way? Where have you traveled from, Miss Porter? Boston, she answered in a small voice. All the way from Boston, only for you to turn her away after she sold every last thing she owned based on a promise you made. Gerald's face turned beet red. This is not your business, Knox. It most certainly becomes my business when a man in my town behaves without a lick of honor. Kieran's voice was quiet, but it carried an edge as sharp as a knife. This woman came here trusting your word, and I am sending her back with the best of intentions. On a first-class ticket, no less. Gerald's voice had become whiny and defensive. Kieran looked away from him and back to Annabelle. He really saw her then, taking in her well-made dress, the refined way she spoke, and the proud way she held her chin up despite being in a world of trouble. Miss Porter, he said suddenly, are you still interested in becoming a wife in Silver Creek? Annabelle blinked, a little taken aback. How did you know that was where I was headed? I did, he said simply, and I'd like to make you an offer. Something different than just sending you back east. He took off his hat, showing a head of thick dark hair. My housekeeper had to leave about 2 weeks ago. Her mother fell sick and needed her to come home. My ranch is in real need of someone to manage the place. So, ma'am, I am offering you that job. It pays a fair wage for a term of 3 months. If, when that time is up, you still want to leave, I will pay for your ticket back east myself, but if you decide you want to stay in Silver Creek, you'll have had a good long while to meet some other folks. Maybe find a better match for yourself. Annabelle just stared at him, trying to read his face. She was searching for any sign that this was some kind of trick, but all she could find was straightforward honesty. You would truly hire me as your housekeeper? Without a single letter of reference? Well, now, you were considered good enough to be Harrington's wife, and he'd never even met you. I figure that's more than enough reference for keeping a house tidy. A slight smile touched the corners of his mouth. Besides, I reckon I'm a fair watch of character, Miss Porter, and you strike me as a woman who has some grit. Someone who does not give up easily. Gerald sputtered, Now see here, Knox, you cannot. I believe Miss Porter can make her own decisions, Kieran said without even glancing at the other man. At him. Well, what do you say? Annabelle's mind was spinning. The offer was straight out of the blue, but it sure was not unwelcome. It would give her a little time to think about her next move, to get the lay of the land in this town before putting down any roots. And this man, while he was a bit intimidating, had just stepped up for her when not another soul would. I accept your kind offer, Mr. Knox, she said, her voice steady, but I ought to warn you, my cooking is pretty much limited to the simple stuff. His smile widened, and it changed his whole stern face. I reckon we won't starve, Miss Porter. The important thing is that you'll get a fair shake here. He turned to the boy who had been watching the whole thing with eyes as wide as saucers. Tobias, go on and take Miss Porter's bag over to my wagon instead. Gerald's face had turned a worrying shade of purple. Now hold on, you cannot just do that. Seems to me I just did, Kieran said, calm as could be, settling his hat back on his head. Now, about those nails I needed, Harrington. As Gerald begrudgingly filled Kieran's order, Annabelle stood a little straighter, and her chin lifted up. This was not at all how she had pictured her first day in Silver Creek, but she had a feeling it might just be a blessing in disguise. As Gerald begrudgingly filled Kieran's order, Annabelle stood a little straighter, her chin lifting. This was not at all how she had pictured her arrival in Silver Creek, but perhaps it was a blessing in disguise. If nothing else, she had 3 whole months to prove she was worth something. Not as some man's mail-order wife, but as her own woman. When they stepped back out into the sunshine, Kieran helped her up into his wagon with a clenched and steady hand. As they started to pull away from the general store, Annabelle noticed more than a few townsfolk just staring at them, their curiosity plain as day. Folks are going to talk, Kieran said, noticing where she was looking. That's just what happens in a small town. What do you think they'll say? She asked, her voice a little quiet. He glanced over at her, and the corners of his blue eyes crinkled. Well, they're likely to say that Kieran Knox just went and claimed Gerald Harrington's mail-order bride for himself. Then his expression turned serious. But I want you to know something, Miss Porter. While you are under my roof, you will be treated with nothing but the utmost respect. I believe you, she said, and was surprised to realize how much she truly meant it. And please call me Annabelle. Annabelle, he repeated, and the name sounded completely different in his deep, calm voice. Welcome to Silver Creek. As the wagon rumbled out of town, heading toward the wide-open country ahead, Annabelle felt a feeling she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. It was a little flicker of hope. Maybe this new life out west wasn't going to be what she had planned, but something much better. But maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what she needed. The Knox Ranch was a sight to see, spreading out across the landscape. It was a whole lot bigger than Annabelle had ever imagined it could be. When they came over the top of a hill, she let out a little gasp at the sight of the main house. It was a big 2-story place built out of good, sturdy logs, with a wide porch that wrapped clean around the front. There were several other buildings scattered around the property, and way out in the distance, A huge barn stood watch like a silent guard over the corrals full of horses. "It's just beautiful," she said, and she truly meant it. The hard look on Kieran's face softened up with a whole lot of pride. "My daddy started with nothing but 100 acres and a big dream. When he passed on 5 years back, he left me 5,000 acres and the finest cattle bloodlines in all of the whole state of Colorado." He gently guided the wagon on toward the main house. "It is a good life," he said, "but it demands a lot from you." "How many folks do you have working here?" Annabelle asked. "Well, I have 8 full-time ranch hands, plus my foreman, a good man named Jacob Miller. During roundup and branding season, we have to hire on some extra help." He then pulled the wagon to a gentle stop. "The house, well, it has been a little neglected since Mrs. Finch had to leave." Annabelle had to hide a little smile at how uncomfortable he looked. "Well, I am not afraid of a little hard work." "That looks like some hard work, Mr. Knox. Please call me Kieran," he corrected gently, hopping down. He came around to her side to offer a hand. His own hand settled easily around her waist as he lifted her down to the dusty ground like she weighed nothing at all. For a brief moment, they stood near enough that she could smell the honest scent of leather and sun on the cotton of his shirt. Then he took a step back, clearing his throat with a hint of awkwardness. "Well, let me get you settled inside," he said, grabbing her bag from the wagon. The inside of the house was big and open, but it definitely had the clear signs of a bachelor living there. A mountain of dishes was piled high in the kitchen sink. A pair of muddy boots had been kicked off right by the door, and a thin coat of dust covered most of the surfaces. "Your room is right upstairs. It's the first door on the right," Kieran explained, leading the way up a wide, sturdy staircase. "Mine's down at the far end of the hall. The other rooms are just sitting and empty for now, though my ranch hand Jacob might stay over if we are working on something late into the night." The bedroom he opened the door to was a wonderful surprise. It was large and airy, with a 4-poster bed, a handsome chest of drawers, and a small writing desk that was placed perfectly under a window that looked out over the western mountains. The bed linens were a little wrinkled, but they looked fresh and clean. The room was simple, but spotless. "I'll leave you to get settled in," Kieran said, his voice low and steady. He placed her small suitcase on the bed. "Now about supper. We usually eat around 6 o'clock, but considering everything, don't you even worry about cooking a thing. I can manage just fine for tonight." "Oh, that is just nonsense," Annabelle replied, pulling off her dusty gloves. "I will need to get familiar with the kitchen sooner or later. It might as well be tonight. Just give me a half an hour to freshen up." A brief look of respect crossed his stern face. "All right then," he nodded slowly. "As you wish. I will be out in the barn if you happen to need anything." And with that, he was gone, leaving her in the quiet room. Once she was alone, Annabelle finally let her shoulders slump and sank onto the bed. The weight of the entire unbelievable day came crashing down on her. She had started the morning expecting to be a bride, a wife by nightfall. Instead, she had somehow become a housekeeper. And not just for any man, but for a man who looked as rugged as the land itself. He was certainly one of the most intimidating men she had ever laid eyes on. And yet, there was something else there too. Something about Kieran Knox that felt steady and true, right underneath all that rough and tough exterior. She carefully unpacked her few belongings, then changed into a simpler, more practical dress and tied a clean apron firmly around her waist. She was determined to make the best of this. Starting right now, she took a deep breath and made her way to the kitchen. It was time to take stock of what she had to work with. The pantry door opened to a pleasant surprise. It was remarkably well stocked, with all the staples a good cook could need: flour, sugar, coffee, and more, and all sorts of canned goods. She found potatoes, onions, and even a few carrots down in a root cellar, which you got to through a trapdoor in the kitchen floor. A little smokehouse stood out back behind the kitchen, and inside were several hams and sides of good thick bacon. By the time Kieran got back, Annabelle had cooked up a simple but wonderfully hearty meal of fried ham, potatoes, and fluffy biscuits. She had also managed to clean the kitchen until it was neat as a pin. Kieran stopped right in the doorway, and his face was a picture of pleasant surprise. "Well, I'll be," he said. "It smells like my mother's kitchen in here." I surely hope that is a compliment, Annabelle said, placing the last of the warm biscuits into a basket lined with a clean cloth. The highest one there is, he assured her, moving to wash his hands at the old pump sink. She was the finest cook in 3 whole counties. They ate their meal at the large kitchen table, and the silence was a bit awkward at first, but gradually it eased into something a whole lot more comfortable. Kieran ate with the genuine appreciation of a man who was plain tired of his own cooking, which Annabelle took as a very high compliment. "So tell me about Boston," he said as they started to finish up their meal. Annabelle began to describe her life back there, telling him about her father's important position as a professor, all the books, their cozy little house, the libraries, and the music she used to enjoy so much. She glossed right over the hard times that came after he passed away. But it seemed like Kieran could read between the lines. "And what made you decide to answer Harrington's advertisement?" he asked, his blue eyes fixed on her. She thought about changing the subject, but chose the plain truth instead. "Well, I needed to, mostly, but I also wanted a change. My whole life back in Boston was already planned out for me. Being the daughter of a professor, I was expected to marry another professor or maybe some fancy lawyer. After my daddy died, I understood how few choices I had ever made for myself." She looked him straight in the eye. "Coming out here was my choice, even if the reasons for it were not the best." Kieran nodded his head slowly. "This part of the country is good for starting over. Most folks around here do not really care where you came from. They only care about what you make of yourself today." "And what about you?" she asked him. "Have you been a rancher your whole life?" A shadow fell across his face. "I was gone for a while. I fought in the war when I was hardly 18. I saw things that no young man should ever have to see." His voice kind of trailed off. "Said he came back a different man, like all of them did. But the ranch, it was still standing. And this land, well, it has a way of putting a fella back together." Annabelle knew in that moment he was sharing something from deep down, a kind of gift, a trust she never figured she would get so soon. "I am so sorry for everything you went through," she said gently. He just shrugged his shoulders, and that vulnerable look disappeared right back behind that quiet wall he kept up. "That was a long, long time ago." He stood up then, gathering their empty plates. "I usually make one last round of the property before I turn in for the night." "You gonna be okay here by yourself?" "Oh, of course. I have more than enough to keep me occupied for a while." She motioned toward the kitchen, which still needed a whole lot of attention. "Do not work too late now," he cautioned her. "The sun comes up mighty early on a ranch." After he had gone, Annabelle went ahead and finished cleaning the kitchen, all the while making little lists of everything that needed to get done in the coming days. The house was big, no doubt about it, but she figured she could manage it with a good plan. She had just decided to call it a night when a sudden knock on the back door nearly made her jump out of her skin. A middle-aged man with graying hair was standing there on the porch, holding his hat in his hands. "Evening, ma'am. Name's Jacob Miller. I am the foreman around here, right here on our doorstep." "Annabelle Porter," she introduced herself. "Please, come on in, Mr. Miller." He stepped inside, his face weathered from years under the Texas sun. "The boss told me about the whole situation back in town. He wanted me to make sure you were getting settled in all right." His unexpected kindness touched her. "That is very thoughtful of you. I am doing just fine, thank you." Jacob gave a slow nod, looking her over from head to toe. "Mrs. Finch was with the boss for 15 years, he said. Those are some mighty big shoes to fill. I understand completely. I have no intention of trying to replace her. I am simply here to help out while I can." Something in her humble answer seemed to put his mind at ease. "Well, that is good to hear. A ranch this size needs a woman's touch, but it also needs someone who understands the way we do things out here." He gestured toward the door. "If you need anything at all, my cabin is just beyond the bunkhouse. The boys will not give you any trouble. Kieran runs a tight ship, but you just holler if you need anything." After he left, Annabelle made her way up the stairs, feeling tired deep in her bones, but surprisingly at peace. Through her bedroom window, she could see Kieran's tall silhouette moving across the yard, a lantern swinging in his hand, checking on his land one last time before calling it a night. There was something so solid and reassuring about the sight, his constant watchfulness, and how seriously he took his responsibilities. Later that night, as she was getting ready for bed, Annabelle realized that for the very first time since her daddy passed on, she actually felt safe. This day sure had not gone the way she planned, not by a long shot, but maybe the good Lord had a different trail laid out for her. With that peaceful thought warming her heart, she drifted off into a deep and dreamless sleep. The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm out at the Knox Ranch. Annabelle was up before the sun every morning to get breakfast going for Kieran and any of the hands who happened to be working close to the main house. Those men ate like they were starved, and you could tell they appreciated her home cooking by the way they cleaned their plates and the quiet, "Thank you, ma'am," they offered. After they all headed out for the day's hard work, she would turn her attention back to the house. One room at a time, she waged a war on all the dust and clutter. And in doing so, she started uncovering a home that had once been cared for with a whole lot of love. Underneath all the years of neglect, she found good, solid furniture, old family pictures, and all sorts of little touches that told the story of the woman who had raised Kieran. There was a beautiful handmade quilt in one room and a little collection of pressed wildflowers in another. Then, on her fourth day, while she was cleaning out the study, she stumbled upon something. A bookshelf just packed with classic books, names like Shakespeare, Dickens, Thoreau, and a whole bunch of others. She was gently running her fingers along the leather spines when Kieran's voice made her jump. "That was my mother's collection," he said from the doorway. "She taught at the local schoolhouse before she married my father." Annabelle turned a copy of Pride and Prejudice over in her hands. Well, she had wonderful taste. "I reckon she would have liked you," he said, and the words seemed to catch even him by surprise. He quickly changed the subject. "I came to tell you I am riding out to the north pasture. I will not be back until after dark." "I will keep a plate warm for you," she promised. He gave a slow nod, hesitating for a second like he wanted to say more, but then he left with a simple touch to the brim of his hat. As the days rolled on, Annabelle found herself looking forward to these brief little moments, these small glimpses of the man underneath that tough rancher's shell. She learned that he had a surprisingly dry sense of humor, a deep respect for the land, and a sense of what was right that never wavered. The ranch hands always talked about his fairness as a boss and his incredible skill with horses. Even in town, on the rare times when she went into town with him for supplies, she noticed folks treated him with a certain kind of respect that went way beyond him just being a major landowner. By the time her second week was over, the house looked like a whole new place. The windows sparkled, the floors had a deep shine, and she had fresh-cut wildflowers on the tables, brightening up every room. She had even tackled that overgrown, neglected garden, coaxing young vegetables from the rich Texas soil with her daily attention. It was right there, while she was kneeling among the carrot tops, that Jacob came looking for her one afternoon. "Miss Porter," he called out, walking toward her with a hurry in his step that was not like him at all. "The boss needs you at the bunkhouse. One of the new hands got thrown from his horse. Thrown real bad this morning. He busted his arm, and he has a pretty nasty gash on his head." Annabelle shot straight up to her feet. "Has someone gone to get the doctor?" she asked. "We sent Billy. But Doc Watson is way out at the Thompson place delivering a baby. It could be hours." Inside the main house, Annabelle moved fast, gathering what she needed. She grabbed clean linens, her little sewing kit, whiskey for cleaning the wound, and a jar of honey to use as a dressing, which was an old remedy her grandmother had sworn by. Over at the bunkhouse, she saw Kieran kneeling on the floor beside a young man laid out on a narrow bed, his face white as a sheet. Tan. "Annabelle," Kieran called out, and you could hear the relief plain as day in his voice. "This here is Alan Peterson. It is his first day on the train, and that bay gelding over there did not take kindly to his handling." She wasted no time, kneeling right down beside the hurt cowboy. Cowboy taking a quick look to see how bad it was. His arm was clearly broken, already swelling up something fierce against his rolled-up sleeve. The gash on his forehead had bled an awful lot, which head wounds always do, but it probably looked a whole lot worse than it really was. "All right," she said. "We need to get that cut cleaned and stitched up." "Then we have got to set that arm," she said, with a calmness she was not really feeling on the inside. She was just putting on a brave face for all of them. She had helped the doctor who took care of her father during his final illness. But this was different. She had never had to handle injuries this bad all by herself. Kieran just nodded. His trust in her was plain to see. Just tell me what you need me to do. With his help, she started cleaning that gash on his head while Jacob held the young fella as still as he could. That whiskey made Alan holler out when it hit the open wound. But Annabelle did not flinch. She just kept working. She was quick and steady, and her stitches were small and neat. Every single one was perfectly even. Setting the bone turned out to be the harder part. It was a challenge, and it took all of Kieran's strength. He had to pull the arm good and straight while she carefully guided the broken bones back where they belonged. By the time they were done splinting it all up, with some wooden splints and clean bandages, all four of them were sweating from the effort. "You've done this kind of work before," Kieran said, as they watched Alan finally drift into a deep sleep thanks to a healthy dose of medicine. "My grandmother was a midwife," Annabelle explained softly. "She taught me the basics of tending to folks." They walked back toward the main house together as the late afternoon sun cast long, dark shadows across the yard. "You're just full of surprises, Annabelle Porter," Kieran said, his voice filled with a warm admiration. "So are you," she answered back. "I never would have figured a rancher would have such a careful touch with a man who was hurt. When you are responsible for other men's lives, you learn what you have to." He paused at the bottom of the porch steps, turning to look right at her. "You have made a real difference here already. The house, the men, even that little garden is looking better than ever." His kind words brought a sudden warmth to her face. "I am just doing what needs to be done." His blue eyes held her gaze, and something quiet and important seemed to pass between them. For just a second, she thought he might reach for her hand, but instead, he cleared his throat and motioned to the door. "You should get some rest." It had been a long day. Later that night, though, Annabelle lay wide awake, playing that one moment over and over in her mind. The moment on the porch. It was the way Kieran had looked right at her. He was not looking at her like she was just some hired help, or even like a friend. No, he looked at her like a woman. It was a look that stirred up feelings deep inside her, feelings she had not been expecting, feelings that made her already tangled up situations seem a whole lot more complicated. After all, she had traveled all this way to Silver Creek for one reason. She was supposed to become the wife of Gerald Harrington. It was a practical match, something she felt she had to do. She had never in a million years expected to find herself feeling this kind of pull toward a man like Kieran Knox, a man whose presence alone could make her heart beat a little faster. Letting herself feel these things was a dangerous game, especially when her own future was standing on such shaky ground. In less than 3 months, she would have to make a very big decision. Was she going to try and make a life for herself in Silver Creek? Or was she going to have to pack her bags and return east? But as the weeks rolled on by, Annabelle found it was getting harder and harder to keep her heart guarded around him. Kieran started asking her to join him on his evening rides around the ranch, showing her the hidden creeks and the quiet meadows that were just bursting with wildflowers. During those rides, they talked. They spoke so easily about books, about his big dreams for the ranch, and about the life she had left behind in Boston. She started meeting his neighbors at the Sunday church services, and to her surprise, she found herself welcomed by everyone with open arms. Most of the folks in town, though Gerald Harrington made a point to steer clear of her, and his sister watched her with cold, narrow eyes. One warm evening in late June, as they sat out on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains a brilliant gold, Kieran mentioned a letter that had come in the mail that morning. "Looks like Mrs. Finch will not be returning," he said. "Her mother's health took a turn for the worse, and she has decided to stay in Missouri for good." Annabelle just nodded, which did not surprise her one bit. "Well, I suppose you will need to find a replacement. Or maybe I will just keep the one I have." He turned to look straight at her, his face all serious. "Your 3 months are halfway gone, Annabelle. Have you given any thought to what comes next for you?" The question just hung there in the quiet air between them, heavy with things unsaid. "I have," she admitted quietly, "but I am not exactly sure what my options really are. You could stay on as my housekeeper permanently, with better pay, of course." He paused, then added, "Or there might be other arrangements we could all think about." Her heart picked up its pace. What sort of arrangements? But before he could answer, the sound of approaching horse hooves broke the silence. Jacob appeared on horseback, his face like a storm cloud. "Boss, we got us a problem. A big one. We are missing cattle from the east pasture. I reckon at least 30 head. I found tracks, and they are heading straight for Blackwater Canyon. Kieran was on his feet in a flash. All the warmth from their quiet conversation just vanished into thin air. Rustlers. How fresh are those tracks? Not more than a few hours old. They will be moving slow, pushing that many head of cattle. Go round up the men. We ride in 15 minutes. Kieran then turned to Annabelle. His expression was sorry but hard as stone. I have got to go. She just nodded, knowing full well how bad this was. Cattle rustling was not just stealing. It was an attack on the whole ranch's future. Be careful, she said, and she could not keep the worry out of her voice. He paused, and then he did something that surprised both of them. He reached for her hand and gave it a quick, reassuring squeeze. Lock the doors up tight tonight. I will send Jacob's wife over to stay with you if we will be gone past dark. Annabelle stood on the porch and watched as Kieran and 6 of his men rode out, their rifles in their scabbards, and a grim determination in the set of their shoulders. The important talk that they were about to have, and all those other arrangements he had mentioned, well, they were just going to have to wait. That night seemed to stretch on forever. Thankfully, Martha Miller, who was Jacob's wife, came over with a bundle of her knitting and some much-needed words of comfort. But sleep just would not come for Annabelle. Every little noise from outside sent her rushing to the window, peering into the darkness, searching for any sign of the riders coming home. They finally returned just after dawn, looking tired and covered in dust, but they had been successful. Kieran found Annabelle in the kitchen, already fixing some breakfast. We got the cattle back, he said, gratefully taking the cup of coffee she offered him. We caught 2 of the rustlers. The sheriff is taking them on over to the county jail. Were you hurt? She asked, noticing the careful way he was holding himself. Just a little saddle sore and mighty tired, that is all. He finished his coffee in one go and set the cup down on the table. I'm going to wash up, then get some rest. Do not you worry about making any lunch for me. Annabelle just watched him as he slowly climbed the stairs, the worry plain as day on her face. Martha, who was getting ready to leave now that the men were back home safe and sound, gave her a knowing look. He works himself too hard, the older woman said gently. Always has, ever since he was just a boy. That ranch is his whole life. He sure seems to have little time for much of anything else, Annabelle had to agree. Martha's eyes got a little sparkle in them. Well, maybe so, but I have noticed he finds time for some evening rides lately. Jacob was just saying he has never seen the boss take such a powerful interest in showing someone the property. The hint in her voice brought a warmth to Annabelle's cheeks. He has just been very kind to show me around, since I am new to the area. Kind? Oh, I am sure, Martha chuckled, gathering her things. Though I reckon there is a little something more than just plain kindness motivating Kieran Knox where you are concerned, honey. After Martha left, Annabelle kept herself busy with chores around the house, trying her best not to think too hard on the older woman's words, or on that conversation that got cut short the evening before. What other arrangements had Kieran been just about to bring up? That question just stayed in her mind as she went about her day. Kieran slept clear until late in the afternoon, coming out of his room looking a whole lot better but still moving with a good bit of care. As he was coming down the stairs, Annabelle noticed him wince just a little. You were injured, she said, her voice in accusation as she left the bread dough she had been kneading. It is from last night. Nothing. One of those fellows just gotten a lucky shot, that is all. He tried to brush off her concern, but she was having none of it, moving right to his side. Let me have a look, she insisted, her voice soft but firm. With a sigh of reluctance, he slowly lifted his shirt to reveal a nasty bruise already spreading across his ribs on his left side. Annabelle drew in a sharp breath. Oh, Kieran, you should have told me right away. I have some arnica salve that would help with that kind of bruising. I have had a whole lot worse, he said, but he allowed her to go and fetch the salve from her room. In the kitchen, he sat down at the wooden table while she gently applied the cool ointment to his injured side. That simple, quiet act of her tending to him, feeling the steady warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips, created a heavy silence between them, full of things unsaid. About yesterday, he began, his voice a low rumble. What I was trying to say, the front door burst open with a bang, startling them both. Tobias, the young boy from town, stood there in the doorway, completely out of breath and with his eyes wide. "Mr. Knox, there is a big brawl down at the saloon. The sheriff sent me to come and get you. He said there is trouble with that rustler's friends." Kieran was already up on his feet, reaching for his gun belt where it hung. "You tell the sheriff I am on my way." He glanced at Annabelle, he said, the frustration plain on his face. "I am truly sorry. This conversation seems like it is just not meant to be." "Go," she told him, seeing the urgency in his eyes. "Be careful with those ribs of yours." He stopped at the door, his eyes holding hers for a long moment. "This is not over, Annabelle. When I get back, we are going to talk." But when he finally returned hours later, he brought news that shoved their personal problems to the side yet again. The argument back into town had blown up into something much more dangerous. Ugly threats had been made against the Knox Ranch, coming from friends of the cattle thieves who had been caught. "Jacob is doubling the night patrols," Kieran explained, while they sat in the quiet kitchen, the old clock on the wall ticking past midnight. "I do not think they will actually try anything, but we cannot take that chance." "How long do you think this will go on?" Annabelle asked, her heart aching at the sight of the dark circles under his eyes. "Until the trial next week. Once those men are finally sentenced, their friends will likely just move on." He ran a tired hand through his hair, a rare sign of just how worn out he was. "I am sorry all this is happening while you are here. Do not apologize. This is your life, protecting what is yours." She paused for a moment and then added in a soft voice, "I truly admire your dedication, Kieran." The hard look on his face seemed to melt away. "You know, there was a time when the only thing on my mind was growing this ranch and adding more land and more cattle. I figured success was measured in acres and the number of steers." He met her gaze straight on. "But lately I have been thinking that there has got to be more to this life than just that." The meaning behind his words made her heart start to pound. He leaned in a little closer, his eyes never once leaving hers. "Such as?" she asked softly. "Such as sharing it all with someone who understands what it is all worth. Someone who sees the same beauty in this land that I do." Before she could even find the words to answer, a gunshot echoed from somewhere out in the distance, and it was followed by the sound of men yelling. Kieran was on his feet in a split second, grabbing for the rifle he had propped against the wall. "You stay inside and lock these doors," he ordered. Every bit of the softness was gone from his voice, replaced by the cold, hard edge of a man bracing for a fight. As he vanished out into the dark night, Annabelle hurried over to the window, pressing her face to the glass, trying to make out what was going on. The flickering lights of lanterns danced in the darkness down by the corral, and the sharp sound of men's voices cut through the night air. Cut through the night air. More shots rang out, and she could not help but flinch. But she was not about to just sit there while Kieran and his men were in harm's way. So she went and got the shotgun she knew was tucked away in the pantry. Her daddy had taught her to shoot years and years ago. He always believed that any sensible person should know how to properly handle a firearm. She moved over to the kitchen window, the one with a clear view of the yard, and she just watched and waited, ready to defend her home if she absolutely had to. That whole firefight went on for what felt like an hour. From what she could piece together, a few men had tried to light up the big barn, but they had been spotted by the night watch before they could get the fire going good. In the shootout that followed, one of those trespassers was wounded, and the rest of them ran off. When Kieran finally came back inside, the look on his face was grim, but he breathed a sigh of relief seeing she was safe. "They are gone," he said. "Jacob is taking the wounded one to the doctor in town, right before he drops him off at the jailhouse." "Was anyone on our side hurt?" she asked, lowering the heavy shotgun. His eyes went a little wide at the sight of that firearm in her hands. "No, ma'am, just a little property damage." He walked toward her slowly and gently took the gun from her. "Well now, where did you learn to handle one of these?" "My daddy always believed in a practical education," she told him. "I am not a particularly good shot, but I do know which end is the dangerous one." A smile touched his lips despite how serious everything was. "You continue to surprise me, Annabelle Porter. Is that a good thing?" she asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. He set the shotgun down and stepped closer, so close that she could feel the warmth coming right off of him. "It is a very good thing." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I find myself thinking about you at the most inconvenient times. When I am checking fences or arguing over cattle prices, I wonder what you are doing, what you are thinking. Annabelle's breath caught in her throat. I have been having similar difficulties concentrating, she admitted softly. His hand came up to touch her cheek. The calluses on his working man's hand felt rough against her soft skin. I was trying to tell you this yesterday. I do not want you to stay on as my housekeeper. For a moment, her heart sank right until he continued. I am hoping you will consider becoming my wife. Those words just hung in the quiet air between them, feeling like they could change everything. Annabelle searched his face, and what she found was pure honesty in his blue eyes. But we have only known each other for such a short while, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I knew from the very first day, when you stood in Harrington's store, with your chin held high, refusing to be broken. His thumb gently traced the line of her jaw. I knew it when I saw you stitch up Alan's arm, without even flinching. And I knew when I watched you bring the life right back into this house, turning it into a home again. Karen, she breathed, her heart hammering in her chest. I am not asking for an answer tonight, he said softly. You still have time left in your 3 months. Use it to be absolutely certain, but I need you to know that when I look at my future now, you are the only thing I see in it. Then, slow and gentle, he lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers. It was more like a question than a demand. Annabelle gave him her answer by leaning into him, her hands coming up to rest gently against his chest. Then the kiss deepened into something that was full of promises and all the good things that might be. When they finally pulled apart, both of them catching his breath, Kieran gently rested his forehead against hers. I reckon I ought to go help the men make sure the ranch is secure, he said, his voice low. It was the last thing on earth he wanted to do. I'll be right here waiting for you when you come back, she promised, her voice as soft as a whisper. As he stepped back out into the cool night air, Annabelle brought her fingertips to her own lips, which were still warm and tingling from his kiss. She had traveled all this way to Silver Creek, expecting nothing more than a practical, arranged marriage with a man she had never even met. But instead, she had found something she never in her life believed was real. A true connection that went so much deeper than just a simple business arrangement. It was a feeling that made her heart beat like a drum and made her spirit feel like it could fly. The weeks that followed brought their own share of troubles and triumphs. The trial for those rustlers went on just as planned, and it ended with long prison sentences that seemed to send a clear message to anyone else thinking of causing trouble for the Knox Ranch. Slowly but surely, life started to get back to normal, though you can bet Kieran kept an extra sharp eye out, watching over his land, and most of all, watching over Annabelle. Their own relationship began to blossom, filled with a careful kind of happiness. Kieran started courting her the proper way, even though they were living in the same house after all. He brought her little bouquets of wildflowers he'd picked, the kind you find when you're riding the fence line. He'd take her on picnics to his favorite quiet spots up in the hills, and every single evening they would share some easy conversation on the porch as the sun went down. The whole town of Silver Creek started to notice the change in their arrangement, and when they started going to Sunday services together, sitting right there beside each other in the old Knox family pew, the whispers followed them right out the door. Most folks were pleased. Kieran was a respected man, and Annabelle had already proven herself to be a capable and truly kind-hearted woman during her short time in town. A few, however, watched with pure disapproval, and leading that sour parade was Gerald Harrington and his sister, who always looked like she'd just bit into a lime. They're telling folks I stole you away from him, Kieran mentioned one Sunday as they rode the buggy home from the church house. Harrington's sister has been bending the ear of anyone who will stand still long enough to listen, saying that I snatched up his mail-order bride right from under his nose. Annabelle let out a laugh. The sound floated away on the warm Texas breeze. He turned me down flat before you even made me your offer. And besides, I was never his to begin with. Kieran's hands tightened just a bit on the leather reins. No, you certainly were not. He glanced over at her, his expression turning serious despite their light-hearted moment of their quiet conversation. You do not belong to anyone but your own self, Annabelle. That is something I admire about you, that independent spirit. And yet, you have asked me to be your wife, she pointed out. Some folks might say, that is just another way of belonging to someone. That is not the way I see it at all. He steered the wagon gently around a bend in the road. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, not one person owning another. My parents taught me that. The deep sincerity in his voice touched her to her very soul. My mom and daddy had that kind of marriage. I honestly never thought I would find that for myself. Have you? He asked, his voice soft. The question was so simple, but it was filled with meaning. Found it? Annabelle just looked at him, this strong, honorable man who had given her a safe place to land when she needed it most, who had seen the good in her from the very beginning, who kissed her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. I believe I have, she said softly. His smile was so bright it transformed his usually serious face. Does that mean you are accepting my proposal? Does that mean you are accepting my proposal? It means I am strongly considering it, she teased, even though they both knew her answer. Her heart had already made up its mind. As the hot days of July melted into August, Annabelle's 3-month trial period was just about up. The big question of what came next hung in the air, though if she was being honest with herself, the answer had become as clear as a blue Texas sky. She belonged right here on the Knox Ranch, and not as some hired housekeeper, but as Kieran's wife and his partner in everything. On the very evening that marked 3 whole months since she first set foot in Silver Creek, Kieran suggested they take a ride up to the highest spot on his land, a flat-top mesa that looked out over the whole valley. There is something I want to show you, he said, giving her a hand up onto the gentle mare he had picked out just for her. They rode along in a comfortable silence while the sun started to dip low, painting the whole landscape in shades of gold and fire. When they got to the top of the mesa, Kieran helped her down, his hands resting on her waist for just a moment. Look on, movies, he said, pointing down toward a little group of trees near a bend in that same creek that gave the town its name. Annabelle had to squint for a second, and then she gasped when she finally made out a building taking shape down among the cottonwood trees. Is that a house? Kieran just smiled and nodded. I have had a crew working on it for the past month. It is not much to look at now, just 4 rooms, but we designed it so we can add on whenever we need to. He turned to look her right in the eye. It is for us, Annabelle, that is, if you will have me. Tears started to well up in her eyes at his words. This solid, real proof of his commitment. His faith in a future with her by his side. You built us a home. I want us to have a fresh start, not for you to be living in the same old house I grew up in, the house my own folks shared. He gently took her hands in his. I want us to build our own life together, right from the ground up. Annabelle looked from the new house in the distance back to Kieran's face, and she could see all the love and hope shining in his eyes. In that very moment, every single one of her doubts just melted away. This was right where she was meant to be, with this man right here in this place. Yes, she said, her voice soft but sure. Yes, I will marry you, Kieran Knox. His smile was as bright as the Texas sun as he pulled her into a big hug, lifting her right off her feet because he was so happy. When he set her back down, his kiss was a gentle but passionate promise of the wonderful life they were going to share. So when, he asked when they finally pulled apart to breathe. As soon as that house is finished, she decided right then. I want to start our wedding right here in our very own home. He just nodded, knowing exactly what she meant by that. It was going to be more than just a house. 2 more weeks, he said, and they're fixing to put the roof on tomorrow. As they rode on back to the ranch, with the setting sun painting the sky behind them, Annabelle felt a deep-down feeling that everything was finally right with the world. She had come all the way to Colorado looking for a safe harbor, even if it meant marrying a stranger. But instead, she had gone and found true love with a man who saw her and loved her for exactly the woman she was. Well, news of their engagement traveled faster than a prairie fire all through Silver Creek. Martha Miller, bless her heart, got all the local ladies together to shower Annabelle with gifts for her new life. They brought handmade quilts and all sorts of things a person needs to start a new home. And the ranch hands, now they were a tough bunch of fellas, not used to getting all sentimental, but they showed their happiness for the couple by putting in extra hours on the new house. They even added some thoughtful touches of their own, like some fine built-in bookshelves and a little garden plot out back that was already tilled and ready for planting. Down in town, it seemed like just about everyone was genuinely happy for the two of them. Everyone, that is, except for Gerald Harrington. He made a big show of crossing the street whenever he saw them coming. You could just feel the bitterness coming off him, clear as day, in the tight set of his shoulders. He is just plain embarrassed, Jacob explained when Annabelle brought it up. This town has not forgotten how poorly he treated you. It makes him look like a fool, knowing the woman he cast aside is getting ready to marry the most sought-after bachelor in the whole county. Annabelle pushed Gerald right out of her mind, turning her focus instead to all the preparations for her wedding in their new home together. They set the date for the first Saturday in September. The plan was for a beautiful ceremony to take place right there on the porch of their brand new house, followed by a big celebration that was going to include the entire community. As the big day got closer, Annabelle found herself thinking back on the incredible way her life had turned around. Just 6 months ago, she had been a daughter overcome with grief, facing the prospect of having nothing back in Boston. And now she was about to become the wife of a man she loved with all her heart, the lady of a successful ranch and a truly respected member of a community that had welcomed her with open arms. On the night before her wedding, as she was packing up the last of her belongings, getting ready for the move to their new home, Kieran gave a soft knock on her bedroom door. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, waiting patiently at the doorway. He stood there respectfully in the doorway. Annabelle looked up and nodded, setting aside the dress she had been folding. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is just perfect," he assured her, stepping gently into the room, but he made sure to keep a proper distance. "I just wanted to give you a little something before tomorrow." From his pocket, he pulled out a small box covered in velvet. "This here belonged to my mother," he explained softly, opening it to show a beautiful gold band with a modest diamond in the middle and 2 sapphires on either side. "My father gave this to her when he asked her to come out west with him. She always said those sapphires reminded her of the big, wide-open Colorado sky." Annabelle's breath caught in her throat at the simple beauty of the ring and the heartfelt story behind it. "Kieran," she whispered, "it is absolutely beautiful." "I had it specially sized for you," he said, carefully taking the ring from the box. "May I?" She held out her left hand, watching as he gently slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit, and the gold felt warm against her skin. "Tomorrow I will place it on your finger again, in front of everyone," he said, his voice a little husky with emotion. "But tonight I wanted this moment to be just for the two of us." Annabelle looked up at him, this kind and decent man who had turned her life upside down in ways she could never have dreamed of. "Kieran Knox, I do love you." It was the very first time she had ever spoken those words out loud, even though they had been settled deep in her heart for weeks now. His blue eyes deepened with a powerful emotion as he gathered her into his strong arms. "And I love you, Annabelle Porter." His kiss was so tender, but it was filled with the promise of all their tomorrows. "You know, by this time tomorrow, you are going to be Annabelle Knox." "I surely do like the sound of that," she whispered, her lips brushing against his. He reluctantly let her go because proper manners said he ought to leave her room, even with their wedding just hours away. "I will see you tomorrow at our new home. I will be the one in the white dress," she teased as he walked out the door. Annabelle stayed by the window, just looking out at the star-dusted land that had somehow become her true home. Far off in the distance, she could barely see the dark shape of their new house, just sitting there waiting for them to fill its rooms with life and a whole lot of love. Their wedding day started out clear and bright, and the September air was just crisp enough with the first hint of autumn. Martha and several other women helped Annabelle dress in the back bedroom of the new house, which had been completed just days before. Her gown was simple but elegant, cream-colored silk ordered from Denver with lace at the collar and cuffs that Martha had contributed from her own wedding dress. "Something borrowed," the older woman had said with misty eyes. Through the window, Annabelle could see guests arriving, ranch hands in their Sunday best, townspeople in buggies and wagons, even a few travelers staying at the hotel who had been invited to join the celebration. The yard had been transformed with tables set beneath the cottonwoods and lanterns hanging from branches in preparation for the evening festivities. "It's time," Martha announced as the minister's buggy pulled up. "Are you ready, my dear?" Annabelle took a deep breath, her hand touching the ring Kieran had given her the night before. "More ready than I have ever been for anything." They walked on over to the front of the house where Jacob was waiting to help her up onto the porch. The moment they rounded the corner, Annabelle's eyes went right to Kieran, who was standing there looking so tall and handsome in a new black suit. His hair was combed just so, and his whole face just lit up with love the second he saw her. The ceremony itself was short but sweet, and their vows were spoken loud and clear for everyone to hear. When the preacher finally announced that they were husband and wife, Kieran's kiss was gentle but full of feeling, mindful of everyone watching, but still showing her all of his love. The party went on long after the sun went down. There was plenty of dancing to some good old fiddle music and more food than you could imagine, all prepared by the wonderful women of the community, and lots of toasts to the couple's happiness. As darkness finally settled in, the lanterns were lit, casting a warm golden glow all over the gathering and over the new Mrs. Knox. "Are you happy?" Kieran asked her softly, as they stole a quiet moment away from their guests, standing near the little creek that would from now on flow right past their home. "Completely," she promised, leaning into his embrace. "Though I have to say, I still can't quite believe how everything has turned out. So any regrets about not heading back east?" His voice was light and easy, but she could feel the real question hiding just beneath the words. Annabelle looked right up at him, this good man who had walked into her life and claimed her whole heart. "My home is right here now with you." His kiss felt different this time, so much deeper, with no need to be proper. It was just a husband's kiss for his wife. When they finally stepped back out to their guests, Jacob shot Kieran a knowing wink, his eyes landing on his friend's slightly rumpled shirt and happy grin. As the evening finally started to wind down, the very last guests made their way out with their final well wishes and congratulations, leaving the newlyweds all alone in their very own new home. Kieran closed the big wooden door after the last person left, and then he turned to Annabelle with a warm smile that made her heart flutter in her chest. "Finally," he said in a low voice, crossing the room to where she stood near the cozy, crackling fireplace. "I have been waiting this whole long day to have you all to myself." Annabelle could feel a sweet blush rising up on her cheeks, even though she was filled with happy anticipation. It really was a beautiful wedding. "It surely was," he agreed, his fingers reaching up to gently unpin her hair, and he watched as it fell in soft waves all around her shoulders. "But this, right here, just us, this is what I have been dreaming about since the moment I woke up. The very moment I laid eyes on you in that general store." His words took her completely by surprise. "Even then?" she whispered. "Especially then," he confirmed, his fingers ever so gentle as they traced the soft curve of her cheek. "I took one good look at you standing there with your head held so high, even after what Harrington did, and something deep down in my soul just knew." "Knew what?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "That you were the one meant for me. All mine." His strong arms wrapped around her waist, drawing her in close. "Oh, that's some mail-order bride, and not as a housekeeper, but as my wife, my partner, and my whole heart." In the warm, flickering glow of the fire, Kieran kissed her with all the love and longing that had been building between them. His touch was gentle but sure as he guided her toward their bedroom, to the very beginning of their real life together. A whole 10 years later, Annabelle stood on the porch of their bigger, warmer home, watching as Kieran taught their 8-year-old son James how to ride his brand new pony. Their sweet 6-year-old daughter Elizabeth sat right there beside Annabelle, carefully stitching a little sampler with her grandmother's favorite saying, "Home is where love grows." The Knox Ranch had truly prospered over that decade, and its good name was known far and wide. Running the place side by side, Annabelle had certainly done her part, bringing her own special touch to everything. She started a small library in town and got a school organized, which was now bustling with 3 dedicated teachers. She even introduced new breeding techniques she had read all about in her farming journals. The town of Silver Creek had grown right along with them, with the railroad bringing in new families and all kinds of new opportunities. Gerald Harrington, well, he eventually sold his general store and moved away to Denver, just could not stand the daily reminder of his own foolishness. In his place, a sweet young couple was now running the store, and they were true partners in helping the whole community thrive. "Mama, look!" Elizabeth's voice rang out. Little James had just managed to guide his pony in a perfect little circle with Kieran's hand hovering close by, just in case. "You did it, James," Annabelle called out, her heart just about bursting with pride and love. Kieran looked up just then, and his eyes met hers from across the yard. Even after 10 whole years of marriage, that one simple look between them sent a wave of warmth right through her. He smiled that same gentle smile that had first given her hope all those years ago. To Silver Creek, a desperate woman with nowhere in the world to go. As the late afternoon sun washed the ranch in a warm golden light, Annabelle thought about the incredible journey that had brought her to this life. She had come out west looking for safety, but what she found was so much more. She found love, a purpose, a family, and a real community. The mail-order bride who never reached the man she was supposed to marry had instead found her true home. Later on that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the last colors of the sunset fade, long after the children had been put to bed, Kieran took her hand, his thumb gently brushing over the simple wedding ring he had placed on her finger 10 years before. "Any regrets, Mrs. Knox?" he asked softly, his voice an echo of the very same question he had asked on their wedding night. Annabelle leaned her head against his shoulder, a deep and peaceful contentment filling up her heart. "Not a single one," she said. "How about you?" His arm tightened around her, pulling her closer. "Only that it took me so darn long to find you. We found each other at the exact right time, just when we were meant to," she said, with the quiet wisdom that came from all the years they had shared. As the twilight deepened into a starry night, they sat together. They stayed there together on the porch, just watching, as the stars started to pop out over the land they both loved with all their hearts. You see, Annabelle Porter Knox was once headed for a marriage that was just a business deal, but instead she had found a love story more beautiful than anything she could have ever dreamed up. It was a story you could not find in the pages of her favorite books, but in the real life that she and Kieran had built from the ground up, right there in the wild and wonderful Texas countryside.